To another webinar from Canonical. We will be starting shortly as we are waiting for everyone to join in. We'll be starting in about 30 seconds. So please be patient.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Tidus Kurek, and together with my colleague Miona Aleksic, today we're going to talk about the future, and to be even more precise, the future of the infrastructure. So this is a very interesting topic because of the recent changes on the market, a lot of organizations are actually thinking it through and trying to understand how the future of their infrastructure should look like. So we're both from the product management team here at Canonical, so hopefully we'll be able to paint a picture for you and help you understand how we as a company, how Canonical envisions the future of data center and the future of infrastructure is going to look like. If you have any questions throughout this webinar, feel free to raise them at any time through the question box. We're going to run an interactive Q&A session at the end of this webinar, but there's no need to wait until the end. So if you put your questions early, we'll hopefully be able to prioritize them. The agenda of today's webinar looks like as follows. So we're going to start with discussing some challenges that VMware users are facing these days. And then we'll talk about the future of the infrastructure, again, how we envision the future of the infrastructure is going to look like. Then we'll dive a little bit deeper into this topic, and we'll talk about the data center and workload cloudification process, how it looks like under the hood. This will follow with an overview of the Canonical's infrastructure portfolio to help you map, various solutions to the needs that you might be facing. We'll also talk about case studies from our reference customers who have successfully migrated from VMware to the infrastructure of the future. That's based on Canonical's infrastructure portfolio. And then we'll close with some takeaways and open this interactive Q&A part. So let's start by talking a little bit about the challenges. So if you're a VMware user, then you've been probably watching the news on the media recently, especially around the acquisition of VMware by Broadcom and all the changes that this acquisition entailed. So I think there's no need for us to reiterate on all of that, right? Like, you know what the challenges are, so you otherwise you wouldn't be here, right? So let's dive straight in instead, and let's talk about the change, right? So I think this is quite obvious that all of those recent changes on the VMware side also enforce changes on your side, right? Like, you're now in this position where you likely have to make a change. You likely have to rethink your data center and infrastructure strategy and adjust to the current trends that you can see on the market. And obviously, changes are no one likes changes, right? So changes are usually painful, changes are stressful, changes are costly. We don't like changes, right? Like, no one likes changes. But at the same time, if you think about that, changes are a natural part of doing a business, right? Like, you make changes every day. If you're an executive, you hire new people to your team, or you make adjustments in your budget plan. So changes are a natural part of doing a business. Changes just happen, right? Uh, Even though some changes, like a digital transformation, only happens once per decade, right? So there are some minor changes that we're doing every day, but there are some major changes that we're only doing, let's say, once per decade, right? Like, and in that case, those changes have to be thought through very carefully to make sure so that all the investment that we make is actually going to bring a return, right? Like, and we end up in a desired state after making these investments, right? So if you think about that, do you remember how we even ended up with VMware, right? Like, I have a pleasure to be old enough to remember the times when VMware was not there in the town, right? So I still remember legacy data centers that were full of pet servers that were sitting somewhere in a server room, like no one was allowed to touch them, because if you touch them, everything is going to break. This is how data centers used to look like in the past, right? But then VMware came in and brought like a completely new perspective into how the data center is going to look like. And that was a huge change, right? That was a huge change, and that was one of those changes that were painful, that were costly, that were requiring a lot of investment and requiring a lot of effort. And this is how we all felt at that time, right? Because that was a huge change. That was a huge change, right? But if we think about that, right, like if you remember those times, if you were involved in the virtualization process in your company, if you were involved in this migration process from legacy data centers to VMware-based data centers, this is how it looked like, right? Like, it required a lot of investments. For example, like a new hardware, the network topology had to be fully redesigned. At the end of the day, this infrastructure had to be delivered and virtualized. Like, I remember in the previous company I worked for, I was virtualizing every single workload, and I was putting it on top of VMware, right? So that was a long process, right? Like, it was definitely a kind of a journey. Also, introduction of VMware enforced a lot of changes to the underlying principles of how we operate data centers. Like, it enforced an introduction of a completely new backup and recovery mechanisms and processes. And at the end of the day, it required training, upskilling, and certification of the personnel, right? But at the end of the day, it brought a number of benefits, right? Like, it brought better resource consumption, it brought faster workloads provisioning processes, it brought improved resilience for failures and greater disaster recovery practices. It brought centralized data center management capabilities, where you can just see all the workloads in your data center from like a single dashboard. And it brought a lower total cost of ownership, which is obviously something important for directors, infrastructure owners, and executives, right? So it was a change. It was a painful change. It was a long change, but it brought its own gains, right? So if we think about that again, getting back to the past, we started with traditional data centers that, as I described, were just pet servers with a dedicated application running on every single server, or even to make things works, right? Like many applications running on a single server, interfering with each other and so on, right? So then exactly in the way I described, like you can't touch this server because everything breaks, right? Uh, then there was this whole wave of virtualization that was brought by VMware. It came like somewhere in 2010s. This is where most of the companies were virtualizing their traditional data centers. And it took us into a completely new world that we've been living in for another decade. But now, with all the changes that are happening on the market, there's definitely something that's going to happen next. At the end of the day, the technology continues to evolve, and it evolves regardless of the market, it just evolves, right? So there's something that's going to come next that will require yet another change that will be, again, costly, painful, long. It will be a journey, right? So it's really important to ask yourself a question: where do you want to land once you execute this change? Because depending on certain choices that you're going to make, you're either going to land back in the past um, that will eventually require running yet another change at some point, or you can shoot for the future, right? And just take a brave step, make the necessary investment, make the necessary commitments, and shoot for the future, right? So I think it's really important to ask this question to yourself when you're about to make a decision, right? So let's talk about that for a second, right? So let me present how Canonical envisions the future of data center is going to look like, so that we could help you to make this right decision, right? So I think the best way to take a look at that is to consider some statistics that you can find at the most popular research and analysis institutions, right? So first of all, taking a first statistic into account, and the source here is ourselves. It's Canonical's The State of Telco at the Edge report that's forthcoming this year. So according to this report, 99% of telecom decision makers realize single telco uses open source these days, right? Like there's definitely something behind that. The world is moving to open source. Also, taking a look at another statistic. So according to the State of Open Source report from OpenLogic, 95% of companies increased their use of open source from 2022 to 2023. The adoption of open source continues to increase, right? Like there's multiple reasons behind that, right? Like we could talk about that, but that's a topic for a separate webinar. It's just a fact. It's just a fact that the world is moving to open source. And Linux historically has been like this kind of a platform that gives you a streamlined access to all the goodness of open source. It serves as an aggregation platform for open source. So usually when companies decide to move to open source, Linux is just a part of this migration journey, right? So now taking a look at the statistics here, Ubuntu continues to be the most popular Linux distribution with the 46% share across all the distributions that are out there. So we're very proud about that. We take a pride of that, but it is just a fact, right? Like Ubuntu continues to be the Linux of choice for people. So that's one trend. The other trend that you should definitely consider is that the world is moving to the cloud. So taking a look at another report from Zipia, 94% of companies worldwide are adopting cloud computing, right? So again, almost every single company in the world is adopting cloud computing these days as a paradigm, right? But does it mean all of them? That doesn't mean public clouds, right? So does it immediately mean using public clouds? Well, not, right? So take a look at another report. So Cisco says that 82% of IT decision makers have already adopted hybrid cloud strategy, right? So yes, they use public clouds, but at the same time, they plug in the private cloud as an extension to the public cloud infrastructure. And again, there are multiple reasons behind that, like cost optimization, digital sovereignty. There are multiple reasons, right? So in fact, 45% of organizations use private cloud to host their workloads today, right? So combine those two trends, open source and cloud, and it's going to be clearly, it is clear that this is how the future of the infrastructure is going to look like, right? So yes, we started with traditional data centers, then VMware came in and brought like a whole wave of virtualization, but the technology continues to evolve and it's not going to stop here. And it's quite sure, taking a look at the stats from the market, so that the future of the data center is going to be open source and it's going to be based on cloud computing, right? So if you think about landing in the future, this is definitely something you should consider, right? Like you should consider building your own open source cloud that would be plugged into this, big public cloud hyperscale ecosystem. So let's talk about that for a second, because obviously this is going to be a big change, right? But as I said at the beginning, changes are a natural part of doing business, right? And there will be certain gains from doing this change, exactly in the same way as when we invested in virtualization in the past and when we invested in VMware, right? So um, let me start with that. A lot of things will have to evolve, right? The data center will definitely have to evolve, right? To turn your data center into a cloud, a lot of principles have to change, right? And it starts on the bare metal layer, right? Like at the end of the day, in a cloud, services are expected to be all the processes are expected to be fully automated. And this includes machine provisioning processes, right? So basically being able to spin up a machine with an operating system installed, spinning up a machine that's configured accordingly. All of those processes have to be fully automated, right? And then they have to be streamlined. So the data center has to evolve, but even more importantly, the workload has to evolve too, right? So again, if you think about that, in the legacy data centers, services used to be treated as pets, right? So there were some machines in a data center that were running like a dedicated business application, and those were treated as pets. We know this analogy, right? But in fact, when the virtualization technology came in and when VMware came in, a lot of those legacy pet services have just been virtualized and put on top of VMware, and they continue to be treated as pets, right? So they are pets, they're just virtualized pets, right? And in fact, this is how the majority of VMware workloads look like these days, right? So they still run as pets, it's just they run inside of VMs with all the benefits that came behind it, so that they can be snapshotted, they can be backtabbed, they can be replicated, or whatever, right? So if you think about the evolution path for a workload, the next step that has to come is definitely going to require an investment on your side, is to turn your workload to be cloud ready. I'm going to talk a little bit about the details of what this actually means in a second, but I just want to make it clear so that it does not mean the same thing as cloud native, right? Yes, ultimately, the workload has to evolve, and I can imagine this evolution path is going to look like that, right? So yes, in the future, you should consider making it cloud native or even SaaS ready as an ultimate desired state. But there's an intermediate step between virtualized and cloud native, that is cloud ready, which is completely sufficient. And in fact, some of the workloads that run on VMware definitely meet those criteria. So they can be very easily migrated to the cloud even today. So what does it mean? What does this cloud ready workload actually mean, right? So we've been thinking about that, and those are the criteria that we've put here, right? So it's a workload that can be provisioned and terminated on demand. It can be launched from an image and customized during the provisioning process. It is designed to store its state on a non-volatile storage. It is designed to scale out rather than scale up. Its HA mechanisms are implemented in software or based on native cloud features. its DR mechanisms are based on native cloud features or third-party tools, and ideally, it leverages other native cloud features such as load balancing as a service, for example, right? So if a workload meets those criteria, it can be very easily migrated to the cloud, right? So how, just to sum that up, how the cloudification journey is going to look like for you, right? So what we would like to encourage you to consider is that you start small, like you build a cloud, you plug it into a broader hybrid multi-cloud ecosystem, and you start using the cloud for the least demanding workloads, right? Like there's nothing wrong in running both environments in parallel for a while until your company, until your organization becomes proficient with the cloud, right? We'll show you examples from customers that have followed exactly that path, right? Like they run both environments in parallel, and every new workload that their company produces, they put in a cloud, while they still continue to running legacy workloads on top of VMware. Over time, the cloud footprint increases and the VMware footprint decreases, right? But wait a second, you might be now wondering, like, what about all of those pet workloads there, right? Like at the end of the day, you might have some Oracle databases there or SAP HANAs that obviously cannot be just redesigned easily to be cloud ready. Yes, so we acknowledge that, and in fact, some of VMware's native application management features that you might be using in VMware these days have their equivalent in open source. So if they do, well, get benefit and apply it to your workloads, right? And it is absolutely fine to actually perform leave and shift migration of traditional workloads and continue treating them as pets. And again, unless your company has a better solution, that remember that simply migrating everything from VMware to the cloud, it is against the purpose of the cloud, right? So you should really consider having an application modernization strategy in your company, right? Like at the end of the day, this should be your ultimate goal. You shouldn't consider doing that if you're not willing to modernize your workloads, right? So what I'm saying right now sounds like a change, exactly as what I described at the beginning, right? Like, in fact, we acknowledge that, we realize that it's going to be a journey. Let's be honest with ourselves, right? Like, it's not a change that happens overnight. It's not a change that happens as a snap. It is going to be a journey. It is going to be a long journey, and at the end of the day, it leads to certain business outcomes that it's really important to consider, right? So first of all, it puts you on the infrastructure of the future. We've discussed these two trends with the world moving to open source and the world moving to the cloud. That take a look at those stats, right? Like we can actually guarantee at least 40% TCO reduction compared to a VMware-based infrastructure, right? Like, and those data are coming from the white paper that was published by us, and they compare the real prices, including individual TCO ingredients such as capex and opex, hardware and software, that were obtained from like a local VMware reseller, right? So if we compare what is the cost of building a cloud using Canonical's infrastructure products compared to VMware, we can guarantee at least 40% reduction in the TCO. And last but not least, you gain another decade of stability, right? So we talked about traditional data centers, like this is where it all started. Then VMware came in and brought virtualization technology. And then if you decide to move to the future, if you decide to move to an open source private cloud, we can actually guarantee that you'll gain another decade of stability. And it's coming from the commercial subscription that's provided on top of Ubuntu that guarantees 12 years of security updates, 12 years of phone and ticket support, and 12 years of guaranteed SLAs. So you can rest assured so that the platform that you're going to choose will be supported for another decade, and there's nothing you'll have to do. We'll obviously encourage you to update it, to upgrade to new versions, but yes, it will be stable. It will give you another decade of stability once you migrate. So that's it from my side. On that note, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Miona to talk a little bit more about the Canonical's infrastructure portfolio. But before I do that, let me just remind you so that you can raise your questions in advance at any time. We've already got a bunch of interesting questions and we'll be keeping an eye on them. So please don't wait until the end. If you have questions, feel free to raise them even now. Thank you.
Thank you, Titus. Now that we have heard what a cloudification journey would entail, let's talk a little bit about Canonical's infrastructure portfolio and the tools we have in that portfolio that can make your cloudification journey a success. Now, on this slide, you can see an overview of some of the main components we have on the infrastructure side. This is not an exhaustive list because we do have other tools at our disposal. However, these are the ones that we typically consider when we are discussing cloud deployments. So if we start all the way at the bottom, you can see a box that says Ubuntu Certified Hardware. And this is an important bit because we have a big certification team that is working with all the major manufacturers in order to verify that Ubuntu is working seamlessly on all the latest hardware that is coming out. So when we're deploying clouds for our customers, we always use hardware from the certified list. But working with hardware has obstacles of its own, which is why we also have a hardware automation tool called MAS, or Metal as a Service, that is aimed at simplifying the way you work with hardware. So what MAS does is really very fast server provisioning for your data center. It has a variety of benefits, including automatic discovery of every network device, inventory for your devices and IP address management, and of course, zero-touch deployment of your operating system, whether it's Ubuntu or something else. MAS is particularly useful if you have a large data center or if you have a data center that you know is going to scale over time. That way you can let MAS handle all of your hardware provisioning and automation so that you can focus on the things that actually bring value to your business. When it comes to the operating system, of course, we always recommend Ubuntu Server. This is one of the most popular Linux distributions, and this is the baseline for everything that we do. However, there is another option which has started to become increasingly more important, especially when it comes to edge deployment, and that is Ubuntu Core. Ubuntu Core is a lightweight version of Ubuntu, but as I said, we are finding it increasingly more useful on the infrastructure side as well. So this is definitely something that we can discuss with you if you have a use case like that. Then we move on to the system management layer. This is not, of course, the core of everything that you need to do, but is really, really important. And Landscape is the tool that we offer in this area, and it lets you really take control of your infrastructure. So what Landscape does is it automates security patching, auditing, access management, and compliance tasks across your Ubuntu estate. So with Landscape, you can always make sure that your infrastructure is secure, compliant, and up to date. Now we move on to the upper layer of the portfolio, which is really where the important things are when it comes to specifically cloud, cloudification, and data center functionalities. So we have, of course, on the infrastructure side, we cover three main areas: compute, storage, and networking. On the compute or virtualization side, of course, we offer KVM, which is the standard virtualization on Linux platforms. But we also offer LXD, which is a virtualization tool developed by Canonical, which does provide KVM-based virtual machines. But it also has additional benefits in the form of system containers, which is like a lightweight alternative to virtual machines, but also numerous built-in management features that let you operate your virtualized infrastructure in a seamless way. On the storage side, we offer the de facto standard for open source storage, which is Ceph. It is a software-defined storage solution, which is designed to provide massively scalable block, file, and object storage from a single distributed cluster. You can consume Ceph as part of our cloud products, or you can consume it on its own. It really depends on your use case. On the networking side, similarly, we have OVN, which is, again, a de facto standard for open source the distributed networking. And what OVN does is really logical network abstractions, such as layer 2 and layer 3 overlays, security groups, load balancing, DHCP services, and others. And finally, on the top, you have the bits that are kind of orchestrating and managing all of these components underneath. We have microcloud as one of the options, OpenStack as another, and I will elaborate on both of those in the next slides. And of course, for those that want to run Kubernetes-based workloads, we have our own Kubernetes distribution that you can benefit from. The important thing to mention is that no matter which of these components you want to use, everything is covered under Ubuntu Pro, which means that with one support subscription, you can make sure that any of these products are supported so that you can really make a combination that is most suitable for your use case without having to think about extra pricing, extra licensing, etc. So again, as I just mentioned, when it comes to the cloudification side, we really have two main options, which are really the cloud platforms that kind of bring all of those components that I was talking about together in one way or the other. So on one side, we have Canonical Microcloud, which is really an opinionated platform that is meant to be lightweight, simple, and it's aimed at covering simpler scenarios that do not require a lot of external integrations and a lot of complexity. On the other side, we have Canonical OpenStack, which is a robust and performant composable platform that is aimed at handling complex scenarios. So if you have an environment that is mixed with a lot of different things that require a lot of different components in order to make the most out of it, Canonical OpenStack is really your best choice. So let's talk a little bit about both of these options. So as you can see on this diagram, Canonical Microcloud is a really simple and opinionated solution. It takes the three components that I spoke about when I was talking about portfolio. So it uses LXD as its virtualization and orchestration tool, and then it brings it together with distributed storage and distributed networking into a simple and opinionated cloud solution. Microcloud deploys in minutes with a single command so that it can be deployed even by engineers that are not infrastructure specialists. It is very easy to get started with and easy to operate and scale. And due to its opinionated nature, it also is very easy to manage so that you don't really need to think about upgrades, updates, day-to operations, but you can really focus on your business. So in a nutshell, Microcloud is an opinionated, lightweight, and performant cloud. It starts from 3 nodes, and then you can easily scale it as you need. And of course, you can manage it in an easy way, either from the web UI or from the CLI, or by integrating it with other tools via the REST API. As I mentioned before, Canonical OpenStack is a modular platform that is really intended to tackle complex infrastructure scenarios. It is based on the upstream OpenStack platform. However, we have added our own spin to it in order to make it more automated, more efficient, and more performant. So Canonical OpenStack does have total bottom-up automation, which means that despite the fact that it has a lot of modules and a lot of components that you need to keep track of, because it is fully automated, a lot of these operations are abstracted away. It is cost-effective and it offers best cost per resource metrics, and we have a couple of studies and calculators that can show you what this really means. You can go on our website to find more information about this. It is highly performant. It has additional EPA features. It supports GPUs, TPUs, and more. But more importantly, it has a rich partner ecosystem. So it really ensures interoperability with whatever tools you are relying on your infrastructure. And of course, it is enterprise grade and you get all the benefits of Ubuntu Pro, which I will elaborate on in just a second. Now, I mentioned when I was giving an overview of the portfolio that the main benefit of it is that all of the infrastructure components and additional tools are all covered under one support subscription, which is Ubuntu Pro. Ubuntu Pro is priced per physical machine per year, which means that it doesn't matter how many cores you're using, how many sockets, etc., how many virtual machines you want to run on top. You just pay one specific price per physical machine and you're ready to go. There is no licensing involved for any of our products, which means that you don't need to, you can consume all of them on its own if you want to. If you don't want to have them supported and you want to support it yourself, you're free to do so. But with Ubuntu Pro, you get additional benefits, which is not just the operating system itself, but a lot of other open source packages. So let me explain what I mean by that. So you may know that Ubuntu operates with an LTS system, so long-term support system. So every 2 years, we publish a new version of Ubuntu that is supported by 5 years for anyone. However, in an enterprise environment, of course, you don't want to always upgrade so often, and you might want to extend this support for a longer period, which is why we used to offer ESM Infra or extended security maintenance for infrastructure, where a version of Ubuntu would be supported for additional 10 years, for additional 5 years, 10 in total. But what we have done with Ubuntu Pro is extend this to not only be there for 10 years, but also to support additional 23,000 packages, open source packages that you might be consuming that are not necessarily Ubuntu related. This could be things like Node.js or OpenJDK or some databases, etc. So with Ubuntu Pro, we support all of these packages, all of the infrastructure components you might be using, and the operating system itself. That way, we can really be your trusted partner for everything open source, and you don't need to think about licensing, about complicated pricing, and about your costs getting out of control. Now, it is not only about the platform and about the support. When it comes to cloudification, as Titus has explained, it involves a lot of moving pieces. It really depends on what your current state is, what are your future goals and requirements, what are your specific needs that we need to address, which is why we also have a professional services team that can really help design and deliver a cloud based on your own requirements. We can help choose the right technology. As you've seen, we have various different options. We can design the infrastructure tailored to your needs. So we can consider the components that we have, or as I said, additional tools that we might want to use, and make sure that we design something that can deliver on your specific use case. We can help you choose the hardware from our certified hardware list. And then we can, of course, deploy the cloud itself and perform the formal handover to you. We provide ongoing assistance through the support portal, which is just the regular support. We also offer firefighting support, which is kind of one-off engagements that can help you solve some specific issues or do some specific tasks that are outside of the scope of the normal support. And optionally, we can also operate your environment for you because we do have a managed services team. But this is not all. In many cases, we would bring our trusted partners to augment all of this with additional things. They can analyze your workloads. They can educate and train your personnel. They can integrate the cloud with various third-party tools that are not canonical tools, but you want to use them. They can help re-architecture your workloads if needed, because as Titus explained earlier, depending on your goals and depending on your current state, you might need to re-architect your workloads. And finally, they can also plan, assist, or even execute the migration of the workloads for you. So in a nutshell, what we really want to offer is a cloud your way. so that you can ensure that you have control over your cloud and data sovereignty, that you have better performance with certified hardware and optimized cloud, that you achieve your sustainability goals, but mostly for you to have architectural freedom and flexibility in order to choose the components you want to use, to integrate with the vendors you want to integrate with, but all of that under a subscription, support subscriptions that is transparent, that covers a lot of different things, and that makes sure that your costs are under control. Now, I do want to just talk a little bit about case studies from our reference customers, because it's all nice when we talk about these tools and how they're great and how they can benefit you. But we just want to provide a few references that can both showcase how our infrastructure can help businesses, but also how there are differences in approaches and how every use case will be different. So first, I want to talk about Sicredi, which is one of Brazil's largest financial institutions. It has over 7 million members. It has a large infrastructure stack, and they have engaged Canonical to support their existing OpenStack deployments, but their approach was slightly different. They know that migrating from old-style virtualization platforms onto more cloud-ready and forward-looking platforms, it's not an easy thing to do, which is why they decided to run both environments in parallel in order to ensure backward compatibility with legacy VMs. So what they are doing is that they are putting all the new workloads onto the new platforms. They're running the old platform in parallel, where they were either re-architect and rework some of the workloads in order to be able to run on the new stack, or just run them until they can sunset them on the old stack. And then over time, these two environments are going to converge. The VMware estate is going to shrink, and eventually all of their workloads are intended to be running on the new platform. As you can see from the quote from their head of infrastructure, OpenStack really helped them achieve 2 to 3 times cost efficiency than using public clouds as well. And the forecast is that this efficiency will also grow as the cloud grows. Another case study that took a completely different approach is Kadokawa. Kadokawa is a subsidiary of leading Japanese media conglomerate. And they have been working with Canonical on a variety of other projects, but then they decided to engage Canonical to also build and support a new open source private cloud based on Canonical OpenStack. And they are gradually moving all of their workloads there. So they chose a more classic workloads migration, where they just lift and shift workloads onto the new platforms, But of course, not all of their workloads will be able to be migrated onto the new platform. For systems that could be migrated to the new infrastructure, they reduce private cloud costs by more than 50%. But also they are expecting additional benefits from using open source environments, because they expect that this will help stimulate their engineers, make them more innovative and more ready to tackle new technologies. Thank you for listening so far. Before we move on to the Q&A, I just want to spend a few minutes to summarize what we have talked about so far. So at the beginning, and how it is necessary in order for businesses to keep up with the needs of today. Cloudification journey is not easy. It requires effort, and it will definitely look different depending on your current state, on your future needs and requirements. And Canonical can really be your trusted open source partner in this journey. We can help determine what is the right direction for you, and then we can deliver a solution based on your needs from our vast infrastructure portfolio. Now, let's move on to the questions. Hello, everyone. I just want to thank you again for listening to our webinar. I hope you found it informative. We have received quite a lot of questions, and we will do our best to go through them. We should have enough time. In case we don't get to your question, please do reach out through the usual channels, and we will make sure to get the right information to you. So maybe we can start with first one that arrived at the very beginning of the webinar, which is, can your solution run in both the private data center and the cloud? So our cloud solutions are mainly intended to be used as private cloud solutions. They can be used to provide public cloud services to the customers, but they're not intended to be run in the hyperscalers in the public clouds. Then we have the second one, which is a three-part question, and Titus, maybe you can assist me with answering this one. So the first part of the question is, what is it like to compare a comparison of your proposed solution versus VMware in terms of efficiency of execution for the virtualization layer?
Sure. So there's a number of benchmarks that can be run to obviously compare the performance of one platform over the other, and we have some research findings that we would be happy to share. We can also have a session to make a little bit more deep dive into this topic. In general, we see good results in terms of comparing the platform, both platforms that we've been positioning here compared to VMware. So usually this is not seen as an issue. At the end of the day, everything depends on the underlying hardware setup. If it's done properly on the storage and on the networking front, we can ensure that you'll be fine. There are no gaps in terms of the hypervisor, so it's really all about the underlying hardware setup.
And then another part of the question, I think the bit about, there is a second part of the question, which is, what is the level of performance in CPU utilization and overhead? I think this also is related to what Titus already said. It depends on the hardware, but in general, in both of our solutions, we are using KVM as the underlying hypervisor, and the performance is quite good. And the final part of the question is, do you have transparent hardware pass-through for PCIe devices like NICs, GPUs, etc.? Yes, we do. In both of our cloud solutions, all of this is supported and performant. Okay, let's move to another one, which is interesting. Do you have a solution like VMware that does not need a lot of compute hardware? VMware is able to run with a single server. Can we use this solution only with one large server for small companies? I can start, and maybe Titus, you can also add to it. So in both of our products, you can start fairly small. When it comes to microcloud, it is simple, it is lightweight, and doesn't require much compute hardware. However, we do require 3 nodes for high availability. If you want to run it as a single node, you can just run standalone LXD as the virtualization layer on one server, but then you don't get all the benefits of high availability. Similarly, for OpenStack, with the new project that we have, you can run it from one node all the way up to how many you need. However, you don't get the high availability and redundancy that high availability provides. Okay, Titus, let me let you answer the next one, even though we already talked about it in the webinar, but it's, how can I lower my Broadcom fee for VMware products?
So I think this question came before we presented the table that compared the CapEx and OpEx costs from VMware-based infrastructure and Canonical infrastructure. So the calculations that we have done, which are again based on the our reference architecture for data center deployment, compared to the exact license cost and support cost that we've got from like a local VMware reseller, tell us that you can save at least 40% of the TCO. And this assumes like significant discounts from VMware, right? Like, so if you're not getting those discounts, well, you can save more. So even better for you. You should definitely take a look at those results, and they're also available in written in the form of a white paper, so we can get more detailed insight.
The next question also arrived, I think, before we really spoke about the option, but it says, is OpenStack really a viable replacement for multiple small clusters of VMware Essentials? What are the pros, cons over, say, Proxmox as a solution? So one of the reasons why we choose to have two solutions is because every use case is different and operational capacity of our users and customers is different. We offer both as an option, and it's really up to our customers to see which one suits their use case better. I would say microcloud is more similar to Proxmox in terms of the technologies that it uses and the simplicity that it offers. However, we have done a lot of great work on the OpenStack side as well to make it more simple and automated. So both are suitable for small scale. It's really dependent on what kind of workloads you would want to run, what kind of integrations you would want to have, and what is the overall operational capacity of your infrastructure teams. Titus, how about backup and restore of workloads in OpenStack? Today on VMware and competing platforms, they rely on third-party backup software. So what is the state when it comes to OpenStack?
That's a very good question, and it kind of ties to the story about pets that we were talking about, right? So if you have a pet workload that you're planning to migrate to a cloud that still needs to be treated in a pet way, you're likely going to need a traditional backup and recovery software. But this also ties to another slide that we are presenting, so that if there's something that we can offer ourselves, and if there's something that we can't do ourselves, then we bring a trusted partner. So we work with the leading partners, ISVs in the backup and recovery space. Sometimes this includes another layer of integration that's required, but solutions like that are available on top of the platforms that we are presenting in this webinar.
The next one has to do with what are the key challenges associated with maintaining canonical infrastructure in a rapidly evolving technological landscape, and how can organizations address these challenges to ensure long-term system stability and scalability? I think we also touched upon it very briefly during the presentation, but I mean, Canonical is a company that really aims to be your trusted partner when it comes to everything open source. We have teams working on a variety of initiatives. We have a large Ubuntu team that takes care of everything open operating system related and a lot of the open source packages. So we really aim to be a hub for all of the newest technology, the newest things that are appearing, and apply them to our open source ecosystem. So the idea by having a company that is behind all of this is that all of these things that are kind of popping up that you might be utilizing in one way or another, but you're not sure if you can use them long term, if they can be supported long term, if there can be anyone to help you if you experience any issues with them. That's why Canonical is there to help you address these challenges together.
And just to expand on that, so security is a key thing. Another very important area is everything around open source operations, right? So being this kind of a platform and this kind of a company that brings all the goodness of open source together, we also care about open source operations a lot. And the automation framework that we touched very briefly here during this webinar, you can definitely go into some more details watching our other webinars or finding some more information at the websites. You'll find out this is really what makes us unique, right? Like, we provide an automation framework for open source deployment and operations, which helps you to significantly reduce the overhead associated with open source operations, right? So security in the first place, operations right after it.
Yeah, and then we have actually a few questions that are very closely related to each other, which are around the Canonical infrastructure platform, licensing model, Ubuntu Pro, and what is supported under the Ubuntu Pro. So maybe I spoke about it briefly in the webinar itself, but let me do it again and clarify it here. So everything that we do in Canonical is completely open source, which means that all of our products, all of our platforms, you can utilize completely for free on your own without any limitations, which means that there are no licensing costs involved. So as one of the users is asking in the questions, is if they want to use our infrastructure products, if they want no support, no managed services, can they use it without any fees? Absolutely. What you get from the Ubuntu Pro is security patching and support services for any open source packages that you are consuming from us. Which means that if you have an issue with your infrastructure, if you have an issue with your operating system, if there is a severe CVE or a big security flaw, then we have an SLA and we need to fix those security issues, or we need to help you and assist with any of the other problems you might be facing. In terms of testing our infrastructure and testing the Ubuntu Pro, so testing our products, you can do it anytime. All of our products have documentation sections which can guide you through the installation, through all the steps you need to take. So you can, again, do that freely and without any fees at any given time. And then also when it comes to Ubuntu Pro is free to test for kind of personal use for up to 5 machines. And if you just go to the Ubuntu Pro webpage, you can find more information about it. And then there is the one that is specifically related to OpenStack open source packages. Maybe I let Titus answer that one.
I'm sorry, Miola, what was the question about OpenStack?
Can you please elaborate scope of support for open source packages in Canonical OpenStack specifically?
In Canonical OpenStack. Okay, so there are 2 layers here. So we are actually we are the company that produces OpenStack packages on Ubuntu. So we are part of the upstream with that regards, and all the packages in the Ubuntu archive follow the security and support commitments that were mentioned by Miona right before. So the other layer is everything related to the automation framework that we use. So here we go into details like charms for managing OpenStack operations, for example, which follow a slightly different schedule. But the goal is to provide 5 years of commercial support for LTS releases of OpenStack, and additional 5 years of security maintenance for all LTS releases.
Then the next question is, what is the limitation of microcloud comparing to OpenStack? Only size or complex configurations? So again, it comes down to the modularity and complexity. Microcloud is meant to be opinionated, which means that it has the default components like STSF and OVN, and that's what you get default out of the box. And in terms of external integrations with other storages, with other networking platforms and so on, that is not possible because we like to keep it simple. On the OpenStack side, the modular architecture allows you to integrate with various storage backends, with various other tools, and to kind of pick the components that you would like to include in your OpenStack deployment, and therefore it can then handle more complex scenarios and be customized according to what fits your use case better. In terms of the sizing, also Canonical OpenStack is much more suitable for large data centers. Microcloud is on a small-ish scale from 3 to 50 nodes. But then for anything that is big and for larger data centers, you would want to go with OpenStack for sure. And for smaller scales, you can choose whatever suits your use case the best. Okay, what are the minimum requirements to run OpenStack on a private data center, Titus?
Yes, so this is a type of question where we should really get an insight on how your data center looks like, ideally, and how your workload looks like. So that would require doing some assessment. We obviously have some guidelines that we can share, but there are so many information to cover here, because obviously we're talking about building a cloud, right? So again, it's not just about software versions. It's all about the hardware, right? Like, how do we set up racks? How do we what is the rack layout? How do we do networking in a data center? How do we configure the hardware? How do we equip the hardware with necessary storage devices and network devices and so on? So I would, instead of answering it here, I would highly encourage you to get in touch for us, sending you the exact minimum requirement that you would be able to evaluate either yourself or together with our team.
Then there is a question. I'm not sure I fully understand it, though. It says, how feasible is this with delivering to multiple people at a time? I do imagine that this is related to multi-tenancy. So if you want to have your platform and then give chunks of it to your different teams. So both of our solutions support multi-tenancy and they perform quite well. So you can absolutely deploy either of our two cloud solutions and then kind of segment it in the way that works best for your team and assign them, and there are no performance issues with that. Titus, do you want to help me answer the next one, which is, in comparing to VMware NSXT, vCloud Director, ARIA Automation or Orchestrator, what are Ubuntu other products compared to VMware products?
Right. So yeah, that's a very good question, right? Like, so not every VMware customer is simply a vSphere customer, right? Like we totally understand, so that there's like a whole gamut of VMware products that you can add on top of vSphere. And those obviously provide additional functionalities that might not be covered by either microcloud or OpenStack on their own. So here we're entering a broader open source landscape and a broader portfolio landscape of everything that Canonical is doing, right? We only had a chance, like the time is limited, so we had a chance to demonstrate like the platforms that you used to start with, right? Like, so if you consider a migration from VMware to open source, right, those are the platforms that we can put in front of you as the first step on your migration journey, right? Like, but then obviously a lot of additional things come into play, right? Like we enter the observability space, for example. We enter the data center management space, IP address management, security management, right? Like there's so many things that are covered in those vCloud Director and ARIA suite, so that not each of them has like a one-to-one equivalent on the open source side, but the capabilities that are provided by those platforms can usually be provided in the can usually be achieved in the open source space as well, right? Like, so there's no single answer we can provide here. That would definitely require a more deep dive into the broader open source landscape and the Canonical portfolio. That would be more than happy to do together with you if you're interested.
The next question is regarding the virtualization platform itself, asking if the solution based on KVM, or is it more like Red Hat OpenShift, which is not true KVM based for virtual machines. So in both OpenStack and microcloud, we use KVM, proper KVM for providing virtual machines. There is no container layer in between, as is in the case of Red Hat OpenShift. So it's true KVM, which is why also the performance is good as well. So what is best, microcloud versus OpenStack for big data systems and data analytics? I think the big data systems and data analytics is quite a broad term. It would really depend which kind of software would you like to run, what kind of models you would like to run, what are your hardware requirements, and so on. In general, I would say that OpenStack is quite good for big complex things that need to scale. But again, that doesn't mean that microcloud is not suitable. It just means that we would need to discuss more details with you and then let you know what is a better recommendation. Do you only support bare metal for OpenStack, Titus?
So I guess this question is coming in the context of testing and experimentation, right? Like, which I guess I can translate it into like, can I run OpenStack inside of a VM? Then yes, you can run OpenStack inside of a VM to get a feeling of OpenStack if you don't have a spare hardware to experiment with that. Is that an enterprise grade solution? No. So there was also some other question, I believe I've seen it earlier, maybe we covered that already. So someone was asking whether you can run it in a public cloud, right? Like, which again raises exactly the same concern, right? Like, yes, you can run it on top of virtual machines in a public cloud, but there's no point of doing that, because both OpenStack and microcloud are cloud solutions on their own. So they're rather, their purpose is to extend the existing public cloud infrastructure and serve as an, like a more cost-effective extension to AWS, Google, or Azure, or any other leading public cloud solutions, right? So technically, yes, it can run on top of virtual machines, but it is designed to run on top of bare metal in your data center, either hosted by you or rented from one of the hosting companies.
The next question is about Ubuntu Pro support cost per physical machine. So all of our pricing is transparent. So whenever you need, you can just check Ubuntu Pro pricing. It's on our website. But the cost with infrastructure support is $1,775 per year per physical machine. And if you would also like to support all of the open source applications that are running on top of your infrastructure, then you can opt in for full support, which is $3,400 a year. Again, all of our pricing is always transparent, so you can just go on our website and check. We don't do any hidden fees or anything like that. Regarding VMware vSphere, advanced features like CPU memory over commitment handling and other features, can Ubuntu compete with this? I would say yes. Both of our products have a variety of management features when it comes to CPU, memory over commitment, advanced resource control. When it comes to device pass-throughs, GPUs, those were also the questions we were getting. Both of them are suitable, and obviously we wouldn't be offering cloud solutions if we didn't have some of these features, because they are sort of a must for private clouds of today. I don't know, Titus, if you want to add anything else to that.
I think you've covered that very well, Miona. Thank you.
Can I provision GPU instances in microcloud? Yes, you can. We support GPUs and vGPUs, so you can provision them and play around with them as you need to. What is the bandwidth required to run multiple nodes at a time through OpenStack? Assume there are 40 users at a time who need access.
So again, this is a kind of a design type of a question that we won't be able to cover here. So I'd like to reiterate on my suggestion, so that with any questions like that, I would highly encourage you to reach out to us through the official channels. We also have some community channels, right? Like if you're if you just need a quick help and are looking for like an expert opinion, feel free to reach out through the community channels as well, right? Like we will always be happy to help you.
And then there is another one when it comes to microcloud. Is it analogous in its operations as well as terms and conditions similar to OpenStack? What are the services that are similar here? And is it free to use? So again, everything we do is free to use. Microcloud is free to use. OpenStack is free to use. Everything is completely free to use. There are no licenses at all. There is no lifetime purchase license or anything like that. You can use it completely for free as much as you like. The only thing you would need to pay if you want is support from us. So that's the support and security patches. Otherwise, if you're happy to support it yourself, handle it yourself, you can use it freely, indefinitely, without paying anything. In terms of how analogous and in its operations it is, well, microcloud is much simpler to operate, and that's the reason we have two platforms. It is much more straightforward. It has a web user interface. You can just kind of create an instance, manage it in a much simpler way, and because there is fewer components and fewer moving pieces, it is much easier in terms of operational capacity. That's one of the reasons why I mentioned throughout this webinar and these Q&As, it really depends on not just your use case, but also your kind of chosen hardware and your operational capacity. And when we have all of that information and all of those puzzle pieces, we can really help you make the best choice for you. And then there was a follow-up on the microcloud versus OpenStack for big data systems and analytics, particularly to deliver lectures to master students. Well, if it's about delivering lectures to master students, I would say probably microcloud is done better because it's simpler to deploy and operate, and you might not need all of the advanced things that OpenStack offers. But again, at the end of the day, it is really up to you. I think we have reached the end of our questions. I hope that this was helpful to all of you. As Titus has already said, feel free to reach out to us either through mailing lists and channels or our community forums. We engage with all of our users there. So if you just want to test things out and you have some questions, just go to our community discourse and feel free to ask, and we'll be happy to help you. Titus, any final words?
Well, we'd like to thank you one more time for your time and attending this webinar. I hope you found this content useful, and we're looking forward to seeing you at some other webinars or conferences. Feel free to reach out whenever you see us.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day and see you in the next webinar.
Thank you.